Okay, something we maybe haven't covered in enough detail is how do I make an equation to match a linear table of values? So we've talked a little bit that a linear equation kind of looks like y equals mx plus b. So we're going to follow that to get a final answer, but to get there, first we have to analyze our table of values first. We have to do some first differences. So remember, that's where we subtract the bottom number from the one above it. 7 minus 3 gives me 4. 11 minus 7 gives me 4. And 15 minus 11 gives me 4. So I know it's linear because my first differences were all the same. So since the first differences are equal, but there's more information I can get out of that. This is part of why it's so important that we do bottom minus top, because that's what gives me the right sign. And this sign, this number here, well, that's going to be what helps to give me my m. Okay, so what is the m? So remember that m, I'm just going to go back over here. So that m right there, that's our slope. We also call that our rate of change. And whatever name you give it, remember that's just equal to the change in y over the change in x. So when I look back at my first differences, this right here, this number, that is my change in y. So my change in y equals 4 for this example. So I've got 4 for this example. And my change in x, well, you have to look back at the x side, and this is why it's very important that it goes up by the same number each time. So if I subtract 1 minus 0, 2 minus 1, 3 minus 2, I'm going to get the same increment each time, which is 1. So for this scenario, I now have my slope. I now have my m value. To get my b value, well, that's your initial value. When we graph it, that's going to be our y-intercept. That's what happens when, that's my y value when x is 0. Y value when x equals 0. So for that, we go back to our table of values. In this situation, it's already listed for us. It isn't always. Sometimes we have to go back and do some thinking. But in this case, y is equal to 3 when x is equal to 0. So now I have enough information to finish my question. So for this table of values, I can now say that my y equals 4x plus 3. So that means each time I went up by 4 and I started at 3. Okay, let's try this example. So again, I have a nice little table of values. So first let's do our first differences to see if it's linear even. So bottom minus top, so you get negative 3 minus negative 5. Well, that's the same thing as negative 3 plus 5, so that equals 2. Next pair, negative 1 minus negative 3 gives me negative 1 plus 3, which is equal to 2. Last pair, 1 minus negative 1 is the same thing as 1 plus 1, which is 2. So in this case, I have a linear function, therefore linear, since my first differences are equal. Okay, so that's good. And while I'm over here, let's maybe also do the change in x. So let's just look for our change in x and see what that looks like. So let's see, we've got 2 minus 1 is 1, 3 minus 2 is 1. 4 minus 3 is 1. So in this situation, I have figured out that the change in x is 1. And I have figured out that my change in y is 2. So I've got tons of information in order to figure out how to find my equation. So let's see. If we start with y equals mx plus b, what we're looking for is we keep that y, we keep that x. We need to put in our slope value, our rate of change value, our change in y over our change in x values, right? Plus whatever our initial value was. So I'm just going to leave that as b right now. Well, we now know that our change in y is 2 and our change in x is 1. So we've got most of it. But we still need to figure out what this initial value is going to be. And this time I'm going to have to do a bit of thinking. So remember, this is the y value when x is 0. And I don't have my x in my table, but I can backtrack and figure that out. Sure. So the one before that would be 0. So I'm still keeping with my change in x. 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. And the backtrack to figure out what that one is, well, this time let's minus 2 to figure it out. So negative 5 minus 2 would give me negative 7. So that's going to be the point that I need. Self-check. Let's go ahead. Well, if I added 2 to that, I would get what I wanted. So minusing 2 gave me the number I needed. So final answer, y is 2x minus 7, because that was my initial value.